Got time for that. We ain't got time for that. We ain't got time for that shit. How you doing? Do you mind supporting Indigenous rights today? Would you mind supporting Indigenous rights today?
What's that?
Indigenous? You? You?
I'm indigenous?
Yes, sir.
I don't know what indigenous.
Do you just said you ain't know what indigenous means. Do you know what indigenous means?
I know.
It's the original people of this earth.
Oh, okay.
Specifically the original people of this land. I'm asking, would you mind making a donation to support our rights? There's a treaty. Well, we prefer Zelle anyway because it's more secure and safer. Okay. Well, when you get a chance to look up Undrip, Google Undrip and read it. Undrip. UNDRIP. It's the United Nations Declarations for the Rights of Indigenous People.
Okay.
They made a new treaty about it the treaty is called Undrip, but they're not enforcing it. It's up to us to make sure it gets enforced. Give me a second, guys. I'll be back.
You on the chat call?
I'm on live. I have to quickly get this information out because of the work that I do. It puts me in prison and straight days. I'm a target. So I have to publicize and make information known because otherwise it's too easy for them to eliminate me. That's what they want to know. Peace and love, chat. What's up? What's up? What's up? All right. Like I said, it's been a long time. I can't even sit down until I clean this chair out. It's been a long time since I posted because when I post, I want to make sure I'm posting productive and good information, proper information, and I want to post it in a way where it's accurate and it's complete and where it's going to be understood. I've been trying to go live on TikTok, but I don't know how to save the lives on TikTok. So when people aren't watching, nobody gets the information because once I get off live, it disappears. So I'm glad that I'm finally figured out how to get the information on here because I was having an issue because with having one device, I did not know how to be able to read the information to you guys so that y'all can have the facts and not think that it's just something I'm just spewing out of my own mouth. But now I know how to do it on split screen. So give me a second. Let me clean this chair out so I can have a seat and we're going to get into it. All right. Peace. You should go and follow the live too. It's on YouTube. It's on it's Journey with the Anunnis on YouTube. We ain't got time for that. We ain't got time for that. We ain't got time for that. We ain't got time for that shit. I got people around here. I'm gonna tell you about some of the stuff that's been going on too when I get back over. Y'all gonna have to hear some of this stuff because I swear when I tell y'all the stuff that's going on, y'all ain't gonna believe me. Y'all ain't gonna believe me. But I'm gonna tell y'all anyway. Because I gotta start documenting everything. I should have been documenting everything, but we about to really to documenting everything because this stuff just be crazy. And they be getting away with way too much. And I don't know about y'all, but I am tired of it. So look, I'm gonna let you know what happened earlier today. Wow, I realized that I'm surrounded by very precious crystals and stones, including kaolin clay, which is from Africa. Is the clay that they use to make war paint and to do ceremonial markings and all types of stuff, right? So I found some big chunks and I got it stored up. And I've been shaving it down so that I could process it into different uses. And I was shaving a piece of sandstone that happened to be colored green. If you're looking for it and you need me to help you find it, just let me know. But it happened to be tinted green. I'm going to show it to you. It's a little heavy, but I'm going to show it to you. It's naturally green. And it's big. So I was grinding that down. And this old European lady, it's always them. Most of the time it's them. Was standing there watching me while she was smoking her cigarette. I won't say anything about her smoking a cigarette near me because she was on the right side. She was on the side of me against where the wind was blowing. So she was staring at me though, and it was making me uncomfortable because I was listening to my Freedom Keys drive. Y'all learn about that next. But I was listening to my Freedom Keys drive, and she was staring at me for a good little minute. Good minute. I didn't say nothing. I looked at her, let her know I saw that she was staring at me. But I didn't say nothing. I just kept on listening to my Freedom Key drive. So eventually she walks up to me and goes, "Is that a live animal?" I just laughed at her and politely snickered and was like, "No, ma'am." And she goes, "Oh, I thought that was a live animal," and just stood there expecting me to respond. I continued to look at what I was doing and didn't even respond to it. Because how am I supposed to respond to that? How am I supposed to perceive that? Other than disrespect and blatant accusations. Very weird and strange accusation that. I'm sitting here with a knife shaving a giant rock in front of a shopping center. And you come to ask me, is that a live animal? Why would I be sitting in front of a shopping center literally going like this with a knife to a live animal? I didn't respond to that. Eventually she walked away, right? So I asked ChatGPT if I was wrong for my perception, and ChatGPT agreed with me. But anyway, we're going to get into what I got on here for. I just wanted to share that with y'all because that's the type of stuff I be dealing with on a regular basis. Share this live. Let's make it go viral because we about to get into Undrip. Feel free to comment. Let me see how I can get it where I can see my comments. If people comment because while we on here. I don't know if it's going to show me how to do it while I got it on a split screen, and I don't see it. Charge it to technology, not to me. It's not that I'm ignoring you. It's just that I don't see it. But we about to get into Undrip. For those of you who don't know what Undrip is the declaration, the United Nations Declarations for the Rights of Indigenous People. Okay? It is the United Nations Declarations for the Rights of Indigenous People. If you would like to and you feel more comfortable, you can go and Google it while I'm pulling it up. And you can read it along with me so that you can know that I'm reading it word for word. Okay? You can split your screen or you can pull it up on another device. Either way, it doesn't matter with me. But just know, I ain't making none of this stuff up. Y'all already seen when I posted, not my last post, but over a year ago, January of 2024, it should have been. I think it was January last year. When I posted me reading the quo warranto from my son's case, I read it word for word. And baby, I may not have posted it, but they closed that case. That case disappeared. I called to find out when the next court date was, and they told me they didn't see no court date in the system. Haven't heard anything else about it since. They hurry up and close that case real quick so that I couldn't progress it up any further. But we're still not stopping because they have not stopped messing with me because now they took my baby girl. They took my baby girl right before June hit. And I already keep saying that all they had to do was leave me alone. And they're still making it clear that they're not going to leave me alone. And now because they're not leaving me alone, I'm finding out more and more information. And I'm not going to stop here. So I want you guys to understand some things, and I have to publicly start exposing. It's to the point now it's not even an option for me to start exposing some things because I am actively being targeted. So I have to expose these things to make it known that if something happens to me, I guarantee you it ain't gonna be what they said it is. They're going to lie. But let's get into Undrip and then we're gonna go further, okay? Undrip. Let's see. Let's get to the beginning. High five. Hold on, give me a second. I'm trying to find it. Because how you doing, love? All is well.
Are you doing all right today?
Yes, ma'am. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to let you know that God placed this on my heart to give you.
Okay.
I don't know what you're going through at all. I don't know what you've been praying for, if you're praying at all, but God sees you and He sees your situation and He is with you. And you might not feel that right now, but just know that He is and He's guiding your steps.
Thank you so
You're
much.
very
I do know
welcome.
that. Thank you very
You're
much.
very welcome.
And
Take
congratulations on your
Thank
bundle.
you. God bless you.
You too. Have a great day. Let's find this Undrip. Y'all gonna start hearing and seeing firsthand. Undrip rights and protections. I need the actual document, okay? Let me see. Give me a sec. I'm sorry, bear with me because I'm trying to find it. I'm gonna find it though. Because one thing about me, baby, I'm determined. Okay? I am determined. Okay. I don't know why it's titled as the overview, but here it is. I found it. I want to read the preamble first, and then it's probably going to take me a while to get to the rest of it because the person that I pulled this up for initially didn't want to hear all of it. They said they was getting bored. So I had to get straight to the articles. Let's get with starting with the explanation of what is Undrip. This is ChatGPT explaining what Undrip is. What is Undrip? Undrip stands for the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People. It was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on September 13, 2007. This declaration lays out a universal framework of minimum standards essential for the survival, dignity, and well-being of indigenous peoples worldwide. It affirms that indigenous people holds inherent collective and individual human rights recognized by their pre-existing rights and adopts existing human rights to indigenous contexts. What does Undrip cover? Undrip is comprehensive and addresses a wide array of rights. Self-determination. Indigenous peoples have the right to freely determine their political status and pursue their development. Culture, language, and identity. It protects the right to preserve, and revitalize indigenous cultures, traditions, language, and spiritual practices. Governance and development. Recognizes indigenous rights to govern themselves and determine their economic and social development paths. Health, education, justice, and more. Covers the right to health, education, justice, and special guarantees for vulnerable groups like women, children, and elders. Legal status and global adoption. Undrip is not legally binding under international law. It is a declaration, not a treaty or convention. My bad, I was calling it a treaty. It says not a treaty. It is at its adoption, I don't understand how it's not legally binding because they signed it and agreed to it. So when you sign any type of contract, it's legally binding. So we're going to look into that too. It is at its adoption, 144 states voted in favor. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States initially voted against or abstained, but since shifted to support the declaration. It is widely regarded as the most comprehensive international instrument addressing indigenous rights. Undrip in action, Canada and beyond. Canada, in December 2020, Canada introduced Bill C-15 aiming to align Canadian law with Undrip. The law received royal assent in June 2021. Bill C-15 mandates that Canadian federal laws must be consistent with Undrip, requiring the government to develop a co-developed action plan plus annual monitoring reports. British Columbia made history by becoming the first jurisdiction globally to embed Undrip into its provincial law via the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, also known as the Declaration Act. It set a framework for reconciliation, greater transparency, and more predictable collaboration with indigenous nations. Significant outcomes, including the Haida Nation gaining title to Haida Gwaii, creation of a co-managed conservation zones, conservation zones and shared decision-making in land, resources, and environmental management. Global examples and challenges. Despite widespread endorsement, implementation varies by country. For instance, at a recent UN expert session, the Zoe Reunification Organization accused India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh of violating Undrip principles despite being signatories. Institutions like the expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous people continues to monitor progress and promote indigenous-led data and policy frameworks. Quick overview. Undrip essentials categories highlighted. Adoption, UN General Assembly September 13, 2007. My bad. Nature, non-binding declaration. That's what we need to work on, because that's the problem. That's the problem right there. That's the problem. Core focus, self-determination, culture, governance, rights to health, education, justice. Global support, initial controversial, now globally endorsed. In practice, Canada's Bill C-15, BC's Declaration Act, mixed implementation globally. Now, how many articles are in Undrip? Undrip has 46 articles in total. So let's get into it. Start from the beginning. United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, adopted by the UN General Assembly on September 13, 2007. Preamble. The General Assembly affirming that indigenous people are equal to all other peoples while recognizing the rights of all people to be different, to consider themselves different, and to be respected as such. Affirming that all peoples contribute to the diversity and the richness of civilizations and cultures, which constitutes the common heritage of humankind. Affirming further that all doctrines, policies, and practices based on or advocating superiority of people or individuals on the basis of on the basis of national origin or racial, religious, ethnic, or cultural differences are racist, significantly false, legally invalid, morally condemnable, and socially unjust. Reaffirming that indigenous people in the exercise of their rights should be free from discrimination of any kind. Concerned that indigenous people have suffered from history, injustice as a result of inter alia, their colonization and dispossession of their lands, territories, and resources, thus preventing them from exercising, in particular, their rights to development in accordance with their own needs and interests. Recognizing the urgent need to respect and promote the inherent rights of indigenous people, which derive from their political, economic, and social structures, from their cultural, spiritual traditions, histories, and philosophies, especially their rights to their lands, territories, and resources. Recognize also the urgent need to respect and promote the rights of the indigenous people affirmed in treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements with states, welcoming the fact that indigenous people are organizing themselves for political, economic, social, and cultural enhancements, and in order to bring to an end all forms of discrimination and oppression wherever they occur, convinced that control by indigenous people over developments affecting them and their land, territories, and resources will enable them to maintain and strengthen their institutions, cultures, and traditions, and to promote their development in accordance with their aspirations and needs. Recognizing that respect for indigenous knowledge, culture, and traditional practices contributes to sustainable and equitable development and proper management of the environment. Emphasizing the contribution of the demilitarization of the lands and territories of the indigenous people to peace, economic and social progress and development, understanding and friendly relations among nations and peoples of the world. Recognizing in particular the rights of indigenous families and communities to retain shared responsibility for the upbringing, training, education, and well-being of their children, consistent with the rights of the child. Considering that the rights affirmed in treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements between states and indigenous people are in some situations matters of international concern, interests, responsibilities, and characters. Considering that also treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements and the relationship they represent are the basis for a strengthened partnership between indigenous peoples and states. Acknowledging that the Charter of the United Nations of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, affirm the fundamental importance of the right to self-determination of all people, by virtue of which they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Bearing in mind that nothing in this declaration may be used to deny any peoples their right to self-determination exercised in conformity with international law. Convinced that the recognition of the rights of indigenous people in this declaration will enhance harmonious and cooperative relations between the states and indigenous people, based on principles of justice, democracy, respect for human rights, non-discrimination, and good faith, encouraging states to comply and effectively implement all their obligations as they apply to indigenous people under international instruments, in particular those related to human rights, in consultation and cooperation with the people's concerns, emphasizing that the United Nations has an important and continuing role to play in the promoting and protection of the rights of indigenous people, believing that this declaration is a further important step forward for the recognition, promotion, and protection of the rights and freedoms of the indigenous people, and in the development of relevant activities of the United States system in this field. Recognizing and reaffirming that indigenous individuals are entitled without discrimination to all human rights recognized in international law, and that indigenous peoples possess collective rights which are indispensable for their existence, well-being, and integral development as people. Recognizing that the situation of indigenous people varies from region to region and from country to country, and that the significance of national and regional particularities and various historical and cultural backgrounds should be taken into consideration. solemnly proclaims that following United Nations declarations of the rights of indigenous people are a standard of achievement to be pursued in a spirit of partnership and mutual respect. Article 1. Indigenous people have the right to the full enjoyment as a collective or as individuals of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, as recognized in the Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and international human rights law. Article 2. Indigenous people and individuals are free and equal to all other people and individuals and have the right to be free from any kind of discrimination and the exercise of their rights, in particular that based on their indigenous origin or identity. Article 3. Indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Article 4. Indigenous peoples, in exercising their rights to self-determination, have the right to autonomy of self-governance in matters relating to their internal and local affairs, as well as ways and means for financing their autonomous functions. Article 5. Indigenous people have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinct political, legal, economic, social, and cultural institutions while retaining their right to participate fully, if they so choose, in the political, economic, social, and cultural life of the state. Article 6. Every indigenous individual has the right to a nationality. Every indigenous individual has the right to a nationality. I need people to learn what nationality means. Article 7. Indigenous individuals have the right to life, physical and mental integrity, liberty, and security of a person. 2. Indigenous people have the collective right to live in freedom, peace, and security as distinct peoples and shall not be subject to any kind of genocide and other act of violence, including forcible removing children of the group to another group. Article 8. 1. Indigenous people and individuals have the right not to be subjected to forced assimilation or destruction of their culture. 2. States shall provide effective mechanisms for prevention of redress for A, any action which has the aim or effect of depriving them of their integrity as distinct peoples or of their cultural values or ethnic identities. B, any actions which has the aim or effect of dispossessing them of their lands, territories, or resources. C, any form of forced population transfer which has the aim or effect of violating or undetermining any of their rights. D, any form of forced assimilation or integration. E, any form of propaganda designed to promote or incite racial or ethnic discrimination directed against them. Article 9. How y'all doing? Thank you so much.
All right, you got it. Okay. Well, I thought she had something she was...
Right here?
Oh, no, you good.
Article 9. Indigenous people and individuals have the right to belong to an indigenous community or nation in accordance with the traditions and customs of the community or nation concerned. No discrimination of any kind may arise from the exercise of such a right. Article 10. Indigenous people shall not be forcibly removed from their lands or territories. No relocation shall take place without free, prior, and informed consent of the indigenous peoples concerned and after agreement on just and fair compensation, and where possible with the option of return. Article 11. Indigenous people have the right to practice and revitalize their cultural traditions and customs. This includes the right to maintain, protect, and develop the past, present, and future manifestations of their culture, such as archaeological and historical sites, artifacts, designs, ceremonies, technologies, and visual and performing arts and literature. States shall provide redress 2. States shall provide redress through effective mechanism, which may include restitution, developed in conjunction with indigenous peoples with respect to their culture, intellectual, religious, and spiritual property taken without their free, prior, and informed consent or in violation of their laws, traditions, and customs. Article 12. 1. Indigenous people have the right to manifest, practice, and develop and teach their spiritual and religious traditions, customs, and ceremonies, the right to maintain, protect, and have access in privacy to their religious and cultural sites, the right to the use and control of their ceremonial objects, and the right to repatriation of their human remains. 2. States shall seek to enable the access and or repatriation of ceremonial objects and human remains in their possession through fair transparency and effective mechanism developed in conjunction with indigenous peoples concerned. Article 13. Indigenous people have the right to revitalize, use, develop, and transmit to future generations their histories, language, oral traditions, philosophies, written systems, and literatures, and to designate and retain their own names for communities, places, and persons. States shall take effective measures to ensure that this right is protected and also to ensure that indigenous people can understand and be understood in political, legal, and administrative proceedings, where necessary through the provision of interpretation or by other appropriate means. Article 14. 1. Indigenous people have the right to establish and control their educational systems and institutions providing education in their own language in a manner appropriate to their cultural methods of teaching and learning. 2. Indigenous individuals, particularly children, have the right to all levels and forms of education of the state without discrimination. 3. States shall, in conjunction with indigenous people, take effective measure in order for indigenous individuals, particularly children, including those living outside of their communities, to have access, when possible, to an education in their own culture and provided in their own language. Article 15. Indigenous people have the right to the dignity and diversity of their cultures, traditions, histories, and aspirations, which shall be appropriately reflected in education and public information. States shall take effective measures in consultation and cooperation with the indigenous peoples concerned to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination, to promote tolerance, understanding, and good relations among indigenous peoples and all other segments of society. Article 16. 1. Indigenous people have the right to establish their own media in their own languages and have access to all forms of non-indigenous media without discrimination. 2. States shall take effective measures to ensure that the state-owned media duly reflect indigenous cultural diversity. States, without prejudice to ensure full freedom of expression, should encourage privately owned media to adequately reflect indigenous cultural identity or cultural diversity, Article 17. 1. Indigenous individuals and people have the right to enjoy fully all rights established under applicable international and domestic labor laws. 2. States shall, in consultation and cooperation with indigenous people, take specific measures to protect indigenous children from economic exploitation and from performing any work that is likely to be hazardous or to interfere with the children's education or to be harmful for the children's health or physical, mental, spiritual, or moral or social development, taking into account their special vulnerability and the importance of education for their empowerment. 3. Indigenous individuals have the right to not be subject to any discriminatory conditions of labor and inter alia employment or salary. Article 18. Indigenous people have the right to participate in decision-making in matters which would affect their rights through representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures, as well as to maintain and develop their own indigenous decision-making institutions. Article 19. States shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the indigenous peoples concerned through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect them. Article 20. 1. Indigenous people have the right to maintain and develop their political, economic, and social systems or institutions to be secure in the enjoyment of their own means of subsistence and development, and to engage freely in all their traditional and other economic activities. 2. Indigenous people deprived of their means of subsistence and development are entitled to just and fair redress. Article 21. 1. Indigenous people have the right without discrimination to improvement of their economic and social conditions, including inter alia in the areas of education, employment, vocational training, and retraining, housing, sanitation, health, and social security. 2. States shall take effective measures where appropriate, special measures to ensure continuing improvement of their economic and social conditions. Let me read that again. States shall take effective measures where appropriate, special measures to ensure continuing improvement of their economic and social conditions. Particular attention should be paid to the rights and special needs of indigenous elders, women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities. Article 22. Particular attention should be paid to the rights and special needs of indigenous elders and women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities in the implementation of this declaration. 2. States shall take measures in conjunction with indigenous people to ensure that indigenous women and children enjoy the full protection and guarantees against all forms of violence and discrimination. Article 23. Indigenous people have the right to determine and develop priorities and strategies for exercising their rights to development. In particular, indigenous people have the right to be actively involved in developing and determining health, housing, and other economic and social programs affecting them, and as far as possible, to administer such programs through their own institutions. Article 24. Indigenous people have the right to their traditional medicines and to maintain their health practices, including the conservation of their vital medicinal plants, animals, and minerals. Indigenous individuals also have the right to access without any discrimination to all social and health services. 2. Indigenous individuals have an equal right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. States should take the necessary steps with a view to achieving progressively the full realization of this right. Article 25. Indigenous people have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinctive spiritual relationship with their traditional owner, with their traditionally owned or otherwise occupied and used land, territories, waters, and coastal seas and other resources, and to uphold their responsibilities to future generations in this regard. Article 26. Article 26.1. Indigenous people have the right to the land, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. 2. Indigenous people have the right to own, use, develop, and control the lands, territories, and resources that they possess by reason of traditional ownership or other traditional occupation or use, as well as those which they have otherwise acquired. 3. States shall give legal recognition and protection to these lands, territories, and resources. Such recognition shall be conducted with the due respect to the custom, traditions, and lands tenure systems of the indigenous people concerned. Article 27. States shall establish and implement, in conjunction with the indigenous peoples concerned, a fair, independent, impartial, open, and transparent process, giving due recognition to the indigenous peoples' laws, traditions, customs, and adjudicate the rights of indigenous people pertaining to their lands, territories, and the resources, including those which were traditionally owned or otherwise occupied or used. Indigenous people shall have the right to participate in this process. Article 28, indigenous people have the right to redress by means that can include restitution, or when it is not possible, just fair and equitable compensation for the land and territories and resources which they have traditionally owned or otherwise occupied or used, and which have been confiscated, taken, occupied, used, or damaged without their free, prior, and informed consent. 2. Unless otherwise freely agreed upon by the peoples concerned. Compensation shall take the form of lands, territories, and resources equal in quality, size, and legal status, or of monetary compensation or other appropriate redress. Article 29. 1. Indigenous people have the right to the conservation and protection of the environment and the reproductive capacity of their lands or territories and resources. States shall establish and implement assistance programs for indigenous people for such conservation and protection without discrimination. 2. States shall take effective measures to ensure that no storage or disposal of hazardous material shall take place in the land or territories of indigenous people without their free, prior, informed consent. States shall also take effective measures to ensure, as needed, that programs for monitoring, maintaining, and restoring the health of indigenous people as developed and implemented by the people affected by such materials are duly implemented. Article 30. Military activities shall not take place in the land or territories of indigenous peoples unless justified by relevant public where am I at? Interest or otherwise freely agreed with or requested by the indigenous peoples concerned. 2. States shall undertake effective consultation with the indigenous peoples concerned through appropriate procedures and in particular through their representative institution prior to using their land or territories for military activities. Article 31. Indigenous people have the right to maintain control, protect, and develop their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and traditional cultural expressions, as well as the manifestations of their sciences, technologies, and cultures, including human and genetic resources, seeds, medicines, knowledge of the properties of the fauna and flora, oral traditions, literatures, designs, sports, and traditional games, and the visual and performing arts. They also have the right to maintain control, protect, and develop their intellectual property over such cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and traditional cultural expressions. 2. In conjunction with indigenous peoples, states shall take effective measures to recognize and protect the exercise of these rights. I'm going to stand up for a second because I need to. But we are on Article 32. Give me 1 second. I don't know why I was trying to disconnect my live. 32. 1. Indigenous people have the right to determine and develop priorities and strategies of the development or use of their lands or territories for other resources. 2. States shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the indigenous people concerned through their own representation institutions in order to obtain their free, prior, informed consent before the approval of any projects affecting their lands or territories and other resources, particularly in connection with the development, utilization, or exploitation of minerals, waters, and other resources. States shall provide effective mechanisms for just and fair redress for any such activities, and appropriate measures shall be taken to mitigate adverse environmental, economic, social, cultural, and spiritual impact. Article 33. 1. Indigenous people have the right to determine their own identity and membership in accordance with their customs and traditions. This does not impair the right of indigenous individuals to obtain citizenship of the United States which they live. 2. Indigenous people have the right to determine the structures and to select the membership of their institution in accordance with their own procedures. Article 34. Indigenous peoples have the right to promote, develop, and maintain their institutional structures and their distinctive customs, spirituality, traditions, procedures, practices, and in the case where they exist, juridical systems or customs in accordance with international human rights standards. Article 35. Indigenous people have the right to determine the responsibility of individuals to their communities. Article 36. Indigenous people in particular Indigenous people, in particular those divided by international borders, have the right to maintain and develop contacts, relations, and cooperations, including activities for spiritual, cultural, political, economic, and social purposes with their own members as well as other peoples across the borders. 2. States in consultation and cooperation with indigenous people shall take effective measures to facilitate the exercise and ensure the implementations of this right. Article 37. Indigenous people have the right to the recognition, observance, and enforcement of treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements included with states of their successors, and to have states honor and respect such treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements. 2. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as diminishing or eliminating the rights of indigenous peoples contained in treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements. Article 38. States in consultation and cooperation with indigenous people shall take the appropriate measures, including legislative... Whoa! Back up! These bees always want to fly up in my face. Look, I ain't crazy. I respect the bees. I just need them to respect me. It did not have to fly that close to my face. I know y'all seen that. That was so uncalled for. Article 38. States in consultation and cooperation with indigenous people shall take the appropriate measures, including legislative measures, to achieve the ends of this declaration. Article 39. Indigenous people have the right to have access to financial and technical assistance from states and through international cooperation for the enjoyment of the rights contained in this declaration. That falcon, it caught something. That falcon, it caught something. It had caught him some food. I want to know what it caught. But anyway, indigenous people have the right to have access to financial and technical assistance from states and through international cooperation for the enjoyment of the rights contained in this declaration. Article 40. Indigenous people have the right to access to and prompt decision through just and fair procedures for the resolution of conflicts and disputes with states and other parties, as well as to effective remedies for all infringements of their individual and collective rights, such as a decision shall give due consideration. Such a decision shall give due consideration to the custom, traditions, rules, and legal systems of the indigenous peoples concerned and international human rights. Article 41. The organs and specialized agencies of the United Nations systems. Put this up. Of the United Nations systems and other intergovernmental organizations shall contribute to the full realization of the provisions of this declaration through mobilization inter alia of financial cooperation and technical assistance. Ways and means of ensuring participation of indigenous people in issues affecting them shall be established. Article 42. The United Nations, its bodies, including the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and specialized agencies, including at the country level and state, shall promote respect for and full application of the provisions of this declaration and follow up the effectiveness of this declaration. Article 43. The right to recognize herein constitute the minimum standard for the survival, dignity, and well-being of indigenous people of the world. Let me read that part again. Article 43. The rights recognized herein, the rights recognized herein constitutes the minimum standard for survival, dignity, and well-being of the indigenous people of the world. Article 44. All the rights and freedoms recognized herein are equally guaranteed to male and female indigenous individuals. Article 45. Nothing in this declaration may be construed as diminishing or extinguishing the rights indigenous people have now or may acquire in the future. Article 46. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, people, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act contrary to the character of the United Nations or construed as authorizing or encouraging any action which dismember or impair totally or in part the territorial integration or political unity of the sovereign and independent states. 2. In the exercise of the rights enunciated in the present declaration, human rights and fundamental freedoms of all should be respected. The exercise of the rights set forth in this declaration should be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law in accordance with international human rights obligations. Any such limitation shall be non-discriminatory and strictly necessary solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others and for meeting the just and most compelling requirement of a democratic society. 3. The provisions set forth in this declaration shall be interpreted in accordance with the principles of justice, democracy, respect for human rights, equality, non-discrimination, good governance, and good faith. Which article was that? Because, okay, that was the last article. So that was Undrip. So I'm going to go ahead and end this live just in case so you all won't think I ain't got no clothes on. I have on a beautiful UMA custom dress, handmade by moi. And that will be the end of this video. And we will be back because now we got to get into the Freedom Keys drives. And if y'all have any questions, please ask y'all questions because I already know some of them. I already know some comments that's going to come because it said that this was not, what was the word? Let's go back to the beginning. It said something at the beginning that I got questions about. Because why? Where is that? Undrip is not legally binding. Why? My thing is, this is what I got to say about that. This was a declaration agreed upon by the United Nations, right? Initially, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States initially voted against or abstained, but since shifted to support the declaration. I want to know why they originally abstained. I want to hear from their own mouth why they originally abstained, why they originally will vote against it. Why would you vote against the rights of indigenous people? And then you agreed to it and you end up agreeing to it. So by not enforcing it, by not making it a part of your law, by acting very heavily against it, are you not showing active opposition to the United Nations? I'm just saying. Would that not be going against the United Nations? Is that smart under y'all's organizations and orders? How y'all got things going? I mean, in the era we in right now, people ain't really caring about doing things the smart way or the way that it should be done, because people are on some we gonna do what we want to do type stuff right now. But I'm just asking a legitimate question. I'm asking this a legitimate question, right? I want to know. Let's talk about it. But we're gonna go ahead and end this live right here, and we're gonna get into the Freedom Keys drives next. Period. Y'all have a beautiful day. Stay up, stay love, and most definitely stay safe. And share this live. Make this jank go viral. Make it go viral.